Okay, I'd like to call the February 6th meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education in session. If we could, roll call, please.
Oh, I am here.
Say hi. Say
Here.
Mr. Gastineau?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Superintendent McCormick?
Here.
Dr. McMahon? Present. Ms. Moe?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Present.
Ms. Wicker?
Here.
Dr. Yeager?
Here.
Mr. Watts?
Here. If you would, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome. Before we move on with approval of the agenda, I have a couple of changes, if you would. We're going to add a second best practice, meeting the needs of all students through flipped mastery and standards-based grading. And then we would like to remove consent item D and new business item B. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from January 9th, 2019?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. There is nothing under statement of the chair. Board member comments and reports. Anybody have anything? Dr. Yeager?
Just a question for staff. Where are we with, Muncie was going to give us a presentation sometime on their status. I've asked for it. This is month 3.
So Dr. Yeager, this afternoon, I will reach out to Muncie Schools and I will work to get something scheduled and you will see that. I will get back with you and let you know when that's going to be on the agenda. So that is on my list.
Dr. Edwards is the fellow gentleman that I've been talking with. So
Yes.
He's the one that said he'd love to come and give a status report update on how things are going at Muncie Community Schools.
I will need to reach not only to Dr. Yeager, to Dr. Edwards, yes. But then I also will need to reach out with you know, the new organization with Ball State. And so I will do that. Okay, sure.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm a little concerned to see the situation with South Bend schools removed from the agenda for today. I think the residents of South Bend and members of that community that have kids in South Bend schools are really being put into a tight squeeze here as it relates to being able to make decisions and plan for school for next year. I mean, there are some dramatic decisions that need to be made regarding South Bend, and the further we push this timeline, the less reaction time I believe the school corporation has, as well as parents and students, to make decisions about what they want to do for the next school year. It's a very serious situation in South Bend. I'm disappointed to hear that it has not resolved locally and that we're being pulled into this. And to the extent, I know we have members of South Bend Community Schools here, so I would just really want to impress upon them that this is a local issue. And I've been involved with several of these now. And if you don't solve it locally, you never like the way it gets solved up here. And the potential consequences and the options that we're looking at are, for me personally, and I know we have some discussions around this, the idea of state takeover is, I just haven't seen it be reasonably successful to actually pursue that again. That's my personal philosophy. So I tend to look toward the real needs for the school, and we have options that allow us to close schools, merge schools, and those have sort of, through the process of being involved in turnaround the state of Indiana, floated to the top of my list of remedies. And if that doesn't work for the city of South Bend, then I think they need to come together with a plan where they fix this problem and not send that problem here in March. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Dr.
I
Yeager?
agree with you, Tony. Thank you for your comments. And I also want to thank, I know the board staff and Dr. Kwiatkowski have spent a lot of time up there. And I know we all step forward as board members once in a while, but I know Dr. Freitas spent a lot of time and a lot of meetings, so we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Public comment, Brian? No public comment. Moving on to best practice. This first one is very near and dear to my heart, so welcome, Dr. Smith.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and very happy to be here this morning to present what we think is a real paradigm shift in school improvement in Indiana. We did put a packet by your chair this morning, so I think that will provide you some additional context. Certainly want to abide by 15 minutes or less, and because I've sat where you sit, and so I certainly appreciate that. And, so David Smith, Superintendent of the Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation, Chad Lockmuller, who you will hear a lot from later, and then an individual who is not with us this morning, but is really seminal in importance with this initiative, and that's Carrie Hilliard, who is our Chief Transformation Officer. So as we move forward, very briefly, the whole intent of this presentation in terms of best practices is to really lift up some of the current challenges that we face in Indiana and actually beyond. Talk about network improvement science truly as a sustained continuous improvement approach. Also talk a little bit about the collaborative efforts between IU and EVSC, and then also opportunities that we think exist for Indiana to be a national leader in this effort. I'd like for you to look at this quote, or I'll read it for those that have your back to the screen. If we really want to get better, we have to make getting better matter again, and this is really a way to do it. So just think about that for a minute. You know, I am truly blessed to be a part of an organization that is very reflective and intentional about our approach and our practice, and we ask these questions frequently. What is the systemic approach we need to utilize? Number two, how do you develop an improvement mindset? Because if you don't have a process for improving, then really, and a process for getting better, then unfortunately the status quo tends to rule the day. And then you tend to get more of what you've always gotten, even though we always want to achieve better results. So I think one of the foundational aspects of this is that this is not a program. This is not a program, this is a process. And it really is a process that leverages all of those individual initiatives for the greater good. Now the next slide, if you're following along in the packet, has a lot of verbiage, and I won't trouble to read all that, but I do want to highlight just a few things. The underlying causes of challenges facing Indiana are more complex than we've truly dealt with in quite some time. And in order to achieve their desired results, we have to do the hard work of creating a culture of continuous improvement that functions in very short and agile cycles, and that is not the way we typically approach improvement. And I'm a huge proponent of beliefs drive actions, and so do systems. The systems that we intentionally create, and then also the systems that are rather informal, but the systems that we tolerate. And those are often the ones that do the most damage. So we have this thinking that we have to empower and train individuals in our enterprise to question what we do and how we do it, and to never fall into the habit of, well, this is the way we've always done things. And these challenges that face Indiana school corporations really go beyond the typical challenges that we face, or that we typically think of that we face in terms of demographics, accountability, those kind of things. We clearly embrace accountability, but But this goes beyond those challenges because we have to think of, or we typically think of school improvement as emanating from the school. I've had the opportunity to speak to you a few times before, and I'm a huge proponent that school improvement has to emanate from the district office. If it doesn't emanate from the district office, then you typically have one-off types of improvement, and often when the personality or the talent leaves, so does the improvement. So it, I think, is vital that we have to have some kind of catalyst, some kind of accelerator to achieve better results, and there has to be a process or a protocol that leads us to continuous improvement with those short iterative cycles that are replicable and easy to understand. And then next, when we think about reframing improvement, these 4 bullets I think are very important. We have to learn how to implement complex ideas that are effectively, reliably, and also at scale, and we have to develop the capacity within the educational system to learn and improve, and I'll speak about that in a few moments. And we have to move away from fidelity of implementation to real integrity of implementation, as well as expanding our ability to manage variability. Frankly, variation performance is at the core of what we're trying to improve. And yet we don't often, thank you, Ron, we don't often address that. And then I think one of the things that is certainly a recurring theme that just came to my attention recently when I had the opportunity to convene with 12 leaders in healthcare and manufacturing and education. Systems thinking is not existent in educational training. Think about that. Systems thinking is not existent in educational training. We are trained from day one as teachers to work in silos. You're a 3rd grade teacher, you teach English, you teach math. Cross-functional teams and the ability to work together to solve our most urgent problems is non-existent. This offers a way forward, and that's why I am such a proponent. Chad?
Well, thank you all so much for the opportunity to come and speak with you this morning. The work that we're doing in Evansville-Vanderburg is work that IU embarked on 2 years ago to really position Indiana University Bloomington as a hub for networked improvement science, both in the state of Indiana and also regionally as well. This model really involves 2 core processes. The first is a structured inquiry process, which we introduce to teachers through a plan, do, study, act cycle. We ask teachers to basically identify a problem that matters to them, identify a change idea that they develop, and then develop tests to determine whether or not that change idea is in fact working. Those tests are aligned to measures that the school corporation has deemed important and that also align with state accountability measures as well. The second part of this model involves basically a networked improvement community, which is a way of accelerating social learning throughout the educational enterprise. This is the systemic part of our work together in Evansville. We're building that networked improvement community across 3 elementary schools in the district right now, and we're slowly scaling that as we see results and as we refine our approach to introducing it. The thing that I want you to understand about networked improvement science is that under this model, Indiana University is functioning essentially as a hub in the organization. We're providing support to EVSC both on the analytics side as well as on the service delivery side. We're helping educators on the front lines think through how this model can be used in their classrooms. And then most importantly, Indiana University is engaging in its own learning and reflection and embedding this into our preparation program experiences. Improvement science really reflects 3 questions. These are important questions because they drive our work with classroom teachers, they drive conversations between principals and teachers, and they also drive conversations between the central office and schools. The first question, what's the problem we're trying to solve? This really is designed to bring clarity and focus to our work, and it's also designed to serve as a launch point for the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. The second question that we ask is, how will we know whether our change represents an improvement? In other words, what evidence will you use to measure your change idea and its effect on the outcome that you care most about? And then third and finally, we ask them, what change can we make to achieve the goal that we're setting? This is all goal-based and problem-based, or as our friends at the Carnegie Foundation like to say, it's user-centered and problem-specific. There are really 4 key improvement tools that we're introducing into EVSC right now. One of them is the fishbone diagram, which is essentially a complex or a way of unpacking complex problems of practice. We're helping teachers identify the various root causes of the problems that they see in their classrooms, in their teams, and in their schools. And then we're using that understanding to inform a theory of improvement. The theory of improvement is reflected in a driver diagram, and then the ideas that are encapsulated in that driver diagram are basically tested through the PDSA. IU is then facilitating the conversations through a networked improvement community, and we're seeking to drive essentially commonalities across the schools while attending to the variation that exists within them. Now, this is important because it requires us to think a little bit differently about measurement. Many of the teachers who we're working with, they focus on what? They focus on NWEA, they focus on iLearn, or whatever other assessments they commonly have had access to. We're now asking them to go back to their teacher education days and think really critically and carefully about practical measures that they see in their classrooms, that they can link to those outcomes that they ultimately know are making a difference for their students. One of the teachers in our work right now, she actually offered this quote in a focus group that we conducted in January. She said, if I care about an issue to identify it as a problem, I work harder to improve it. We're seeing that in all of our teachers, we're seeing that with our principals, and we're seeing that with other participants in this initiative as well. The other thing that's important to understand is that because the process is occurring within a PDSA, teachers are operating within a very heightened space of accountability. They're required to produce evidence, they're required to justify their outcomes, they're required to basically show us that the change idea that they're implementing is actually working. And we're seeing some significant shifts as a result of that because they're having to suddenly be transparent about whether or not the micro adjustments that they're making in their classrooms are actually getting the results that they want. David, did you want to add something about measurement?
I think we're good.
Okay. So this all actually is part of a process that we're also engaged in at IU, and I want to share this as just an illustration because it gives you a sense of how we're approaching this work at a university level. IU is really trying to solve an important problem. We recognized several years ago that we weren't supporting schools and school corporations across the state on issues of continuous improvement. We didn't have the mechanism in place to do that. We didn't have an improvement model that resonated with schools. We didn't have deep partnerships with school corporations. And so we started looking essentially at what the causes of that were. We looked at our program and our curriculum. We looked at the resources that we were deploying within higher ed. We looked at our relationships between K-12 and higher ed. And then we also looked at our approach and our capacity. And we came to realize that this was a problem that we could solve if we began working on it intentionally. This led us to develop a theory of improvement. And this is basically the theory that is guiding our work at IU. This is a reflection of the driver diagram that many of our schools are actually creating as they embark on their own PDSAs. Basically, what this shows you is that we are adopting a multi-pronged, multi-level approach to try and introduce networked improvement science in school corporations across the state and to position IU as its hub in the state. We're looking specifically at our university-based learning opportunities, how we're partnering with local school corporations, also how we're engaging in teacher and principal professional learning and preparation activities, and then we're also thinking about how we as faculty develop and learn new skills and ideas. Now this leads us to the partnership that we have with EVSC. IU began this partnership with EVSC in 2015 with a successful principal leadership cohort. Through that process, we realized, this might surprise you, IU was behind. We needed to think differently about how we were preparing principals to engage in continuous improvement, to see the system where these problems or these challenges were in fact existing, and to think differently about how we could leverage our preparation experiences so that they were more meaningful for the folks who are working in schools. This led us to embark on another partnership where we basically recruited EDD students from EVSC, and the district graciously provided them with a scholarship to engage in a dissertation that helped them understand, mine, and make sense of a problem of practice. And it was about this time that Carnegie, the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, invited IU and EVSC as one of 11 sites to be a partner in their iLead initiative, which stands for Improvement, Leadership, Education, and Development. With Carnegie as a partner in the background, EVSC and IU are now working together to test, develop, and ultimately implement these ideas in a meaningful way. Now, this is probably the information that you're most interested in. These are some of our early outcomes. It's important to recognize that we've been working at this only 4 months. We're already beginning to see significant shifts in teacher practice, not only as it relates to collaboration, but also as it relates to the utilization of instructional time. In one of the elementary classrooms in EVSC, we actually see teachers using the PDSA process, and so far they've recovered 3 hours per week of instructional time to devote to other instructional activities. We see teachers who have essentially been arranged in horizontal PLCs starting to work vertically, asking questions about how they can engage in conversations around shared issues of improvement. We see principals spending more time in classrooms, and their coaching of classroom teachers is becoming increasingly focused on the problems of practice that the teachers have identified. And most importantly, at all of our launch sites, we see classroom teachers offering suggestions to one another in a new and non-threatening way. This is really a significant shift, but it's also emblematic of what we see happening in other sites that are participating in the iLead initiative, because they're actually shifting the work process of classroom teachers.
Tell you, I know a lot of people that talk quickly, but you got a lot in. This basically is the final slide, even though you have some additional slides in your packet. I just want to reinforce a few things that are really questions. So once again, how do we as an organization improve? How do you develop an improvement mindset? And then how do you empower your teachers to do the job that they love and they want to do? This work has empowered teachers in a way that goes well beyond anything that I've ever seen. It actually does energize them. It is also spreading somewhat organically in the schools. So we have to make certain as a district office that we have the capacity and the capability to support this as it does grow. But from a foundational aspect, I wholeheartedly believe in this because I've seen the incredibly positive benefits that it has to offer. And it is one of those things where a rising tide raises all ships. And truly, I think that this is the catalyst that we need in education to once again empower teachers and help them to see that they are the individuals that are the ones that help all of our kids have a better life. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions by board members? Dr. Fergus?
David, it's great to see you back again. I use Evansville as one of the beacons of change and transformation in the state. You touched on two principles I think that are really important, which is continuous improvement and also the notion of systemic transformational change. And that is a concept that we keep trying to get across to superintendents, boards, and teachers and others. So keep moving in that direction, keep talking. And my colleagues at IU, I'm at IU South Bend, and so I can appreciate what you're doing. My question is, if you have teachers sort of identifying their own problems and solving them, which is commendable, of course, what is the grander scheme from the central office and the notion of systemic change? It seems to a person not in education, maybe those are at competing demands. How do you bring it all together for transformational change?
Certainly. Great question, and good to see you all again. You know, we have invested so much time and resource into our continuous improvement plan, which others kind of refer to as a strategic plan. But, and I say this with some embarrassment, our school improvement plans were not necessarily aligned to the corporation improvement plan. And we do have a great deal of learned individuals throughout our buildings, but certainly in central office, whose primary focus is making certain that all change or all improvement that requires a change, let me back up. Not all change is improvement, but all improvement requires change. So how do you actually focus all of your change efforts into aligning to your systemic goals? So this truly does fall into, I think, the area that if we're all pushing in the same direction, we can achieve great results. So it is more of a focused approach. Teachers then can align their work to the school improvement plans, which are aligned to the corporation improvement plan. So it really is a way of making certain that we're all swimming upstream.
Would it be fair to say it's a cultural change within the community, the school community, that it's a new way of thinking about change? Because change is intimidating, of course, from the research, and few people like to change. But is that the unifying theme that's driving your entire district now?
It is. Recently, there's an individual who is a national expert on change and the dynamics of change. And no matter where she travels, two things are fundamental: communication and trust. And if there is not trust that exists, that you can try something and fail, then typically you then fall back into compliance, and compliance never drives any improvement. So yes, I'm a huge proponent of beliefs drive actions. So teachers now have to believe that they will be appreciated and encouraged to find those improvements within their classroom, and all of that needs to align with the overarching goals. Thank you. Absolutely.
Many of our school improvement and district improvement models have tended to orient to change and to improvement as a process of disaggregation. We basically go down to the lowest common denominator and look for the problems at that level. But systemic improvement ultimately requires a process of aggregation, bringing those various entities together into some type of a coherent strategy. That's where networked improvement science comes in, because it basically allows the district to work in an aggregated manner, bringing individual PDSAs up from teacher teams into school-level drivers, and then into a systemic rationale for why we're doing what we're doing that does align to the continuous improvement plan.
Any other questions about board
I
members?
just have a comment.
Oh.
I just want to congratulate both of you. So Dr. Smith, appreciate your leadership in Evansville. Dr. Miller, appreciate your leadership at IU. Coming from a Purdue grad, that goes 10 times that compliment. But you're a perfect example of leadership matters. So I appreciate everything you're doing for your students and for your entire community. So congratulations and thank you from the department and from just the kids that you're serving. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Byron, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Well, I would, and I'm actually really excited about this because two really unrelated best practices that I think this was a perfect segue for the next best practice, and actually to introduce the person that's going to give the best practice. And it's interesting because we're going to hear from a teacher, and we just heard that teachers need to be leading because they have the practical measures, right? And so we're going to see that in action. And I want to bring Senator Andy Zay up from District 17. He and I've had the chance to visit on multiple occasions about education, and I just want to say, one, I appreciate his leadership and his interest in education, and I also want to say that a lot of times legislators, because I have to hear this all the time, get bad raps for not knowing education, and I just want you to know this is a legislator that spends time in and with his schools. And I appreciate that, and that's actually where this came from. He was all excited when we were visiting about what he had seen in a classroom, and I'm like, well, tell me more, and then it's like, we need this as a best practice. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can share that same excitement. Thanks, Senator Zay.
Well, thank you very much. Very honored and humbled to be before you today and celebrate in this education moment. Last time I was with you, it was a little bit of forgiveness, if you will, and working on some accountability grade, but very excited to be here today. And before I introduce our guest, I do have some special guests, which I introduced a few of you to. Indiana is a part of the Midwest Higher Education Compact. Our investment in that has saved the state of Indiana over $6 million in resourcing primarily technology, but many other services for the state. And the executive director and her vice president are here today, Susan Heergaard and Robert Trimbath. And I'd like everyone to welcome them down from the great state of Minnesota. So they're just doing a state visit today and networking around the Capitol, and thought we would start here. But anyhow, exactly to the point, and what a great segue into the group I'm going to introduce to you now. Self-improvement is what this teacher felt she had to do. The dog and pony show in front of the classroom, losing kids to sleep and inattentive, as if that's a word. There I go, butchering that in front of the Board of Education. But she realized that she had to change her ways, and the self-improvement in herself as a teacher and educator has really brought her classroom to life. And that's what I got to witness firsthand in visiting her classroom. The accountability rests solely on the student, but she defines the curriculum and the state standards and applies the resources to those students. And what that's enabled her to do is to be not necessarily a teacher, but an education manager and facilitator, and meet each one of those kids with their learning abilities where they're at. And when I visited the classroom, there was group learning going on. There was a student that was actually already done with the course, mentoring a few of her peers. There were some other students that were working online, doing a visual thing on an iPad. And it was just impressive from the standpoint that You had all modes of learning going on in the same topical area, and no one was being restrained. Those that were able to excel had already completed the course for the semester, and those that needed help, she was able to be an intentional teacher in that mode. So I won't get into those details, but I have from Metropolitan School District of Wabash, Mike Kiefaber is their superintendent, Andrew McDaniel, my old running partner, which he's still running, I'm not, is the principal at Southwood High School, and then Shelley Fouts is a teacher that I want to introduce that will present her own learning style to you and teaching style. Thank you very much. Shelley?
Good morning.
Welcome.
I'm very nervous.
Morning.
This is one of those be careful what you wish for, right? Sharing what I do. Didn't intend to do that.
Perfect, take your time.
I know. I want to start out by saying I am the place where technology goes to die. And I'm not kidding. I hate technology. It is not a friend of mine. I have been working with a couple people since last night, actually yesterday afternoon, trying to make things work, and they're not going to work. But that's okay. So you're not going to see my webpage, and you're also not going to see my YouTube channel, which is fine. But what I have found that has helped me, I think we got the computers in 2012, 2013. I was the teacher in the front row who had no idea how to turn it on. I was the teacher in the front row when they said, click on this, and I'm going, I don't know what that means. I have no idea what you're talking. I am the teacher that cried every night. I don't know how to do this. I am a social studies teacher. If you ask me about the Constitution right now, I can tell you where to find anything. I'm your girl in economics and government. I currently teach the history of rock and roll, which I just added as an elective, so I can help you out in rock and roll too a little bit. But computers, technology scared me to death. I cannot do this. I'm very nervous. I'm more nervous than I thought I would be. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because my whole entire goal is to figure out the face-to-face time with my students. What is the best use of my time when my students are in my room? And for years, I lectured. I can lecture with the best of them. You wouldn't think that right now, but I really am a pretty good lecturer. I am old school. You will do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it, and the consequences are severe if you don't. Extra credit, no. Can I turn it in tomorrow? No. If it's late, it's a 0. And I did that for 20, probably 17, 18 years. Frustration. I teach seniors, college visitations, 4-day with no school because we have 30-degree below 0 weather. We're going to take them out for hearing. I've got seniors who have to be retested and retested, so I have 3 days where my lowest level students who are not in my room, I don't have access to them. Read the assignment tonight. Did you read it? No. So all of these things that everyone who's been in education can relate to. And then I had a senior class where, I thought I was pretty good at my job, and they tested me to the point where I really wanted to quit. I cannot stand in front of this group of students anymore. What am I going to do? So first year we have the computers. First semester, I did everything I was supposed to. We're going to make this work. At the end of the semester, I could not get the content that I needed to cover. Once again, I teach government and economics. I don't teach computers. And when the machine got in the way, I said, put the machine away. I cannot get to what I need. I need standards that I have to cover, and there's not a single computer standard on there. But second semester, like I said, I have to still teach my class, so I will never forget getting on YouTube and finding a federalism lecture, which was exactly like the lecture that I would have given. I made a study guide, threw it out. I sat in the back of the room. I do not have to stand in front of this group of kids ever again. Obviously, that's not ideal, and that was years and years ago. I went to a conference on standards-based grading. And if you want to, I've got the red folders. And the very first thing I have there is grades should be based on what a student has learned, not on how many points they have earned. And that is so important to me. I don't know how many times that and I actually did this once, I gave a test, and then I turned around and gave the same exact test the next day. Students who got A's one day got F's the next day. And I had a student come up, and she said, I really didn't understand that. And I said, I know you didn't understand it. I got that. And so Rick Wormelli, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him at all. I am a huge fan. I have been to 3 or 4 of his conferences. He does standards-based grading. And I want to show you a couple things that I have as evidence for my kids. My kids do all of their work for 0 points. There are no points for quizzes. There's no points for homework. There's no points for work. I give them all the resources that they need, and they decide what is best for them. They know what the test questions are going to be. I give them all of that up front. They know what is expected of them. There are no secrets in my classroom. This is what I want you to know. These are the tools that I have for you. It's on my webpage. All of my videos, all of my lectures are on there. They have access to the whole entire curriculum. And as you're looking at that, I'm going to point to the last green. I have color-coded everything in your folder as I have them color-coded in my 3-ring binders back at school. This is a test over trade. I give no multiple choice questions. I can't tell if you really know it. If there's a math question in economics, you have to show your work. I have to know that you're not guessing. They have to prove to me over and over and over again that they understand. And the beautiful thing is they come to me when they're ready. I don't say we're having a test on Monday. When there will be kids taking tests today. I have a sub that I trust. I don't let every sub do this, but I have 2 subs that I really, really trust. And she's comfortable, and the kids will go to her today and say, I'm ready for a test. I am not there. My class is going on. They're listening to my lectures. They're taking quizzes. They're going to the library, printing off handouts. They're doing all the work while I'm not there. The reason that I printed this one off is because she came in Monday morning and took this test. And a 4 is an A for me. Standards-based, my grading scale is 4, 3, 2, 1. 4 is an A, 3 is a B, 2 is a C, and then if you get anything below a C, I put NTY, not there yet. And they have to keep doing it over and over and over again until they get to a point I consider a 2 mastery. So they know, and I highlight things and I mark things. The only grade that they get is what they do when they tell me that they are ready to take this test. So she took this Monday, which doesn't sound like a big deal. We didn't go to school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of last week. So you tell me how many teachers have students come in Monday morning, 2nd period, and can take a test. I probably gave 7 or 8 tests and probably 15 to 20 quizzes on Monday. They just kept working. The very last page that I have in the 3-ring binder, each week they have to fill out. What did I know? What do I know now that I didn't know when I came in today? And they tried to pull the whole, oh, I did unit 2.1. You're telling me what you did. You're not telling me what you learned. I want to know what you learned. I don't want to, I took a quiz. No. What did you learn? And if you'll notice on Tuesday, school canceled. And then she told me what she learned at home. Wednesday, school canceled. She told me what she learned at home. She did that Thursday and Friday. Now, y'all, once again, we have e-learning days and makeup days. Yesterday was a makeup day. So these kids want to finish. They want to be done. And I struggled with that. I had one student in my government last semester who finished with 4 weeks left to go. But she was in my room 3 periods a day. She would come in every Monday and she was ready to take a test because she worked at home. And in the front, if you want to pull that out, that's my government final. It's 28 pages long. I had 6 students that have IEPs. Only one of them passed it, but they passed the semester. So, but it's 28 pages long. And I have a video that actually 2 of my girls made for me yesterday. I said, go and tell me what you think about standards-based grading and flipped learning. And they're like, okay. So I handed my computer, they went off and they made a short video over all of this. And I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, Haley said, and you'll hear it, she's like, I could take that test today. I could take that test today and still do very well because they're learning it. I don't collect points, and I would have said I'm very passionate about teaching. I'm no longer passionate about teaching, I'm passionate about learning because these kids know it. I am boggled by the questions that I get from them that they would have never asked me before. And that was another comment before this. I didn't even know what question to ask. Now they're so, they have to do it. There's no cheating. No, you can't cheat. There's zero opportunities to cheat in this because I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. They have to do it over and over and over and over again. But the very back page, if you want to pull that out. It's an amendment test. My kids have to learn the 27 amendments. I'm going to show you how I have them do that. And once again, they're doing it for no points, but they're all doing it. I'm going to show you. They do posters. And this is one of the students. 0 points. She did this for no points. That's 1 through 11. Oh, 1 through 11, and then 12 through 27 is on the other side. But yeah, spectacular. But the test, the handout that you're looking at, that's the last 2 pages of my 28-page final. This young lady, this is going to cry. I can't tell. She asked me last week, what time is it? I'm like, what did she say? She's like, I can't tell. So I know I didn't answer or say much about the standards-based or the flip, but it's changed my life. I love it. So I'm going to leave it at that because I know. If you have questions.
Any questions or comments? Sorry.
First of all, one, I'm really inspired. As a guy that is going to have to do something else a long time to do something more longer than what I taught, right? And it's things like this that make me want to go back and teach. So I'm inspired, and I see why Senator Zay was inspired as well.
I wasn't this emotional when he was in class.
And I appreciate you sharing, and you should be emotional. That's okay. I was telling a story from the classroom the other day and got teary-eyed, and that's been 20-some years ago. Yeah. For that. My question is, and I'm going to ask it of your principal, right? Because one of the things right now that's really, really important, and I would like for you to come up, if you would. Because you clearly are a leader in your school. You are a teacher leader. You are what we really want with that, right? How are you leveraging her as a teacher leader? And I'd like to know a little more about how you got empowered to be where you are. I think that's an important piece from a best practice standpoint. We heard that from the group earlier. I think it's important from you all as well, because you obviously are getting it there, right? And are able to do that. So could you share with us a little bit from that perspective?
Well, kind of my leadership philosophy is a lot of what David Pink says in the book Drive, that people need to be reminded of their purpose, given opportunities to master what they do, and then when they're really good at it, give them autonomy. And Shelley knows the purpose. It's not a job, it's not a career, it's her calling. And to see her enthusiasm when she speaks about what she does, and to go in her classroom. We were speaking outside in the hallway one day before class began, and it was 5 minutes after the bell had rung, and she said, "Hey, take a look in there." And the kids, they were down there and they were working. They were working on government. These are seniors who are, 18 weeks away from graduation and never having to set foot in our building again, and they're working on their government, their econ. And that was really, really exciting to see. And so her enthusiasm is infectious. And so we talk about that purpose. I can't dictate that teachers use flipped mastery or standards-based grading. But what I can do is give them that opportunity and make sure that those opportunities are available to them. And so providing articles, book studies, engaging in training so that they can see that, taking a look at our final examination and talking about, I saw a final examination that, 27, 28 pages long, and a kid who is not a typical honors kid, and looking at the complexity of their answers and their breadth of knowledge on that was incredible. And then the autonomy piece, I just get out of her way a lot of times, and she does awesome, awesome work. And so providing that environment for teachers to know that they can try something, and this is a pretty big undertaking, and it's probably, you might fail at it the first time around, or 2 times or 3 times. It might not go well.
I've been working at this for about 5 or 6 years now, and I have done it wrong every way there is to do it wrong. I really have. I have probably 300 videos out there, and I should get rid of half of them. My first one was 20 minutes long, and I spoke very slowly and articulated. But my thing now is telling people a 5-minute video takes 5 minutes to make, and that's a 30-minute lecture for me in a classroom where I have 6 IEP kids, where I'm going, put your phone away when I'm getting this. So now they have me in 5 minutes and can remind me. They had me the 4 days at home. I have a document camera. I was telling them on the way, I heard a 911 call. I don't know if they heard that from that young boy who called 911 and said I'm having a bad day. Said, I don't know how to do this math. I don't know how to do it. So I have a document camera. I sit down with the handout. I'm talking them through it. So my kids are doing, my AP Econ kids are doing video today with me teaching elasticity of demand. I don't miss a day. I have covered so much more than to a depth. It was before. Do you want us to do the explain questions now? Do you want me to do the why questions? No, we don't have time for why. We don't have, you gotta know there are 27 amendments. Forget what they are. We're gonna sing the preamble. Forget what it means. And now, I also put a copy of an annotated Constitution. My kids know their Constitution backwards and forwards. I let them use this on the test, and I don't apologize for that. You shouldn't have to memorize this document. But my kids, if you ask them any topic, they can tell you where to find it. All of my kids can. So, and like I said, 6 IEP kids from here to here, they're giving me fabulous answers. And some of them just, they've never been made to do it. And it's easier to put a 0 on a piece of paper than to say you're not getting a 0, you're going to do the work. So, I've watched those where they tell me no zeros. I agree. But when you're talking on a scale of 1 to 4 or 0 to 4, the 0 is recoverable. 0 to 100, and that's a whole different subject, I know. So, my kids, but I don't know what they're doing. I have a student here, another final exam that I have here. He got an A+. He didn't do a poster. Before, I was, where's your poster? And I'd be mad every day. I can't believe you're going to do it. You're going to do it. He's like, I don't want to do it. I know the 27 minutes. Then why do I make him do it? I'm not collecting points. They're learning. They're learning the way that it's easiest and best for them. I don't know what's going on in their lives. I don't know what their extracurricular. I got some kid. We all know. We've heard the stories. I've got kids telling me stories this year that it's just like, forget the econ. Take care of yourself. There's more important things. And she says, I'll get to it. And she will. But if I were in a traditional classroom, she would have missed so much. And she's so grateful that she has, the flexibility to learn it when she's not dealing with family issues that are beyond anything that a child should have to deal with.
BJ.
Any other questions?
So Shelley, you're a perfect reminder during a time at the General Assembly where the teacher salary pay is getting a little interesting upstairs at the State House. But I want to say, so many times with the conversation is, hanging on to those beginning teachers, for appropriate reasons. We're losing about 35% in year 1 through 5. But you're an example of the power of the experienced educators, because you've had that time to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and really master your craft and your profession. So thank you for what you do in the classroom, but I think you have been a good reminder today of how important it is that we take care of the whole spectrum of teachers, from inexperience on up. And so just having said that, thank you for what you're doing. Congratulations on your work.
I think it's like in any profession, we always focus on the worst of the worst instead of realizing the staff that I work with and the administrators that allow me to do the crazy things, and they trust me, and we have lost some really good teachers, and it's sad. There are teachers in the building right now, I don't even know what their names are, and we're a junior, senior high with less than 500 kids. I mean, we have 30, but it's like, I don't know if we're gonna be there next year, and it is sad, and teachers are bringing people in who have no degree in education, and to someone like me who is passionate about it, not everyone can do what I do, and to feel like it is a profession. So.
Bring your government classes to the State House.
Well, I just took my AP. I have the same kids in AP Government and AP Econ, so I just took them to Washington D.C.
Good for you.
4 days. I take them every year. I take the group there, so that was interesting. We were there during the marches, all 3 of the marches. This was clear of most of that. So.
Any other questions or comments? Dr.
Congratulations, Shelley. And your building principal talked about, gave a good example of what good leadership is. And sometimes it's just as simple as getting the heck out of their way of good practitioners. And you're the good practitioner, you're the good leader. Thank you to Senator Zay and Dr. Ernest for bringing Shelley in. And Mike Kefabers is the superintendent, and Mike stays the heck out of the way of great employees as well, and lets people do their thing.
I do have it. Would it be okay if I showed that 5-minute video that the girls made? Is that something we could show?
Send it out. But you can share it out with us?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, and
Perfect.
Please watch it. The girls, it was amazing, and I really appreciated them taking their time to do that. So I would appreciate if you would watch that.
So Shelley, is anybody else picking up your practices within your building?
I have.
Or within your district?
There are 2 other teachers that are, well, one other who really does the standards-based, another one who kind of dabbles in it, and another one who's wanting to kind of dabble in it. There is another teacher who is doing the flip mastery. And flipped mastery is the on your own. Because a lot of people are doing the flipped, and they get really bogged down in the videos, and it's not the video, it's what can I do with the 47 minutes that I have those kids face-to-face. And so,
Okay.
the lowest level.
If you could you step up to the mic so the folks at home can pick you up?
Yes,
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that's kind of, I had all this made up and I was going to go right through it, and none of that worked out for me. But the Bloom's taxonomy, instead of doing the lecture, sending that home and doing the higher order things in class and stuff. And so there's a math teacher that's doing that also. She's doing the flip mastery, so the students are at their own pace, and they come to us when they feel like they're ready to take a test. So
It takes some courage as a teacher.
and I was that control freak.
Yeah.
But my level of happiness, and I really feel like now all that time and all the things going wrong, I feel like I finally, and after 23 years, I finally figured out. Now next year I will probably redo it and figure something else out, but for right now, my husband keeps saying, every year you keep telling me you're not going to work this much. I'm like, I think this is it. I think this is the year that I'm not going to be working until 10 o'clock every night, and at the building at 6 and 6:30. So I don't want to scare people off in my building because they see that I work a lot, but
Well, we all know that students learn in different ways, and we're discovering that teachers teach in different ways and can be successful for students. So thank you for it.
yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for allowing them to come. I think as we legislate, and certainly what we do, we focus on process and systems. And what I call a water cooler moment, sometimes we don't have that downtime to reinvent ourselves and make ourselves the best version of ourselves. It was very empowering to me to see this teacher refined and reinvent herself. And you can see how that really transcended to the students, where we had students. One thing she didn't share is they were rarely able to get to the judiciary. And so through this process, they're actually into 12 to 15 landmark cases. And so not only are they empowering these kids to learn, they're getting through much more content, even with the IEP that she gave an example of. And was very empowering to me. And thanks for allowing us the time to share some of the greatness in Senate District 17 and one of my 11 school corporations. And if I have anything to say about it, we'll be back.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. We have special education child count verification, A through F appeals, school safety loan, approval of the 511 IC 7 special education final rules, and appointment of executive director. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Well, point of order, didn't we scratch, which one did we scratch?
We scratched D.
D.
So moved.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Moving on to new business, intervention, Matchbook learning. Welcome, Ron.
You all received a memo, as well as a copy of the signed innovation agreement between Matchbook Learning and Indianapolis Public Schools. You also have a recommendation from staff, and we have representatives from both Matchbook Public Schools as well as Indianapolis Public Schools if you have any questions about the memo and recommendation.
Questions by board members?
I have a question for Ron. Ron, whenever we support these innovation networks, transformation zones, the partners coming together are really critical. And my sense, as with Tony over many years, we've been doing this for a long time, is my concern is the level of confidence that you have in each individual partner as well as the partners coming together. And so I'd like you to talk about your level of confidence from a research-based perspective. Do they understand the foundational concepts? Do they understand what needs to be done? And do you feel that they are able to implement what the contract calls for?
Yeah, so frankly, in this particular instance, I relied heavily on the evaluations of two external organizations, one being the Office of Education Innovation, the Mayor of Indianapolis's charter school body, authorizing body, as well as the Indianapolis Public Schools. But I've also conducted my own research, and it is my belief that the research of those two organizations and approval by those two organizations, as well as mine and some support from the Department of Education, Robin LeClaire, School Improvement Director, that Matchbook Learning does have the background and expertise to execute the contract. And I would add one other thing, a key principle that we all know around turnaround is dramatically changing the conditions within the school. And really the innovation school model here in Indiana, that has been celebrated nationally creates those conditions. So by entering into the agreement, they've codified the conditions that research suggests are necessary to drive this type of turnaround. And then I do believe, not only my evaluation, but as well as the other two, that this particular operator has that expertise. And I'd be happy to, if you want them to add. I think.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from each partner specifically on that notion. Do you have the ability to carry out the contract with fidelity? And do you understand the transformation process and how it's different than how we operate schools? We had a discussion in another district about a transformation leader who really isn't the kind of principal that we've prepared for many years. It has to be an expert in transformational leadership, and your heads are nodding in the right way, so I appreciate that. But can you talk about how it's different than a typical principal coming in and try to change the culture of a school?
Sure. I've never been a typical principal. So I'm Amy Swan, head of school, chief academic officer for Matchbook Learning. I wasn't a typical teacher and didn't become a typical principal. I started off as a teacher who realized, hey, there's an emergency. Kids can't do the work or read if they can't read. We've got to teach reading across subject areas. I've brought up academics in every place I've been a transformational principal in other places. In Kentucky, I knew that I had to change culture. I had to change everything about the school in order to transform and improve. So I took a state watch list school all the way to the first P21 exemplar school in the nation. I went on to work with Matchbook Learning to discover how do I personalize, how do I really help kids, in their culture, in their community? How do I get to know them, bring the village together to help the kids and to personalize for their needs and to really transform in a sustainable way? And so we took that. We've been to Detroit, I've worked in New York, New Jersey, done some work in DC, and really built and gotten better with those foundations. And it is because of my track record and the data that I bring to the table of being transformational that I fully believe that we can execute on this contract.
My other question for my IPS friends is the sustainability factor. So this is a short-term intervention in that it's starting now, but plan for a long-term experience because it takes research that has at least 3 to 5 years to transform a school. So from our IPS friend, what's the plan for sustainability as we go along? Once Matchbook leaves potentially after they change the culture, what are IPS's plans?
Sure. I think one thing I would add to your original question about sort of how we're confident in the abilities of our innovation partners to do the work that's laid out in the contract is that selecting a partner to restart one of our chronically underperforming schools is sort of, we don't take that as any light charge. We're working with folks who essentially are applicants for almost a year before they launched that school, and Amy spoke to some of her extensive experience before she came to Indianapolis to found Matchbook Learning at Wendell Phillips School 63. So we start with letters of interest, really robust applications, and then we work comprehensively with the Mayor's Office of Education Innovation, who charters 5 of our 6 Restart partners to make sure we're all swimming in the same direction. So to your question about sustainability and sort of the long-term intervention, it would not be our intent, actually, that Matchbook leave. The contracts are 5-year contracts, but they are set to automatically renew based on continued sort of achievement of the metrics that are laid out in them by the partners. And unless there's a mutual consent or some reason to get out of the contract, that would not be our intent.
Would you talk about the application process? I understand it, but maybe others don't. The application process where Matchbook or other organizations come to IPS and complete an application. And what do you look for in the application, and maybe describe the process briefly?
Sure. So right now we run about a 1-year application process. We open what we call our call for letters of interest in July of what would be the preceding school year. Those are due in September, and immediately we start conducting interviews based on those letters of interest. They're cross-functional, so our special ed team, our finance team, our academic team, et cetera. It's a very all hands on deck interview scenario. Then sort of concurrently, IPS is conducting assessments within our schools to ascertain if there would be conditions that would lead to us recommending any of our schools for restart. As you probably saw in media coverage, we didn't recommend a school for restart for this coming school year. It's the first time in 4 years we haven't done so, which I think speaks really positively to the work that we're doing to increase achievement through various ways across the IPS portfolio of schools. So in the event that we did determine that restart is the best intervention for schools, typically we would be able to make that assessment in about November. We have to wait on the release of the state data. We know it was a little delayed this year, so that pushed us back a little bit. Once we name a school that may need to be restarted, then we start a more intensive matching process. So we already have a letter of interest. We've already started interviews. Then we would ask an applicant, like we did with Matchbook a year and a half ago or so, let us know if the 2 schools that we named for 2018 are somewhere where you think your program would be a good fit for the students and for the community. And then there's a sort of second layer of application that comes to that. We conduct focus groups, community meetings at the school level to start the dialogue between the folks who'd be most impacted by the intervention and the partner. Have a robust conversation there. Lots and lots of conversations about the logistics, the financials, the metrics in the contract, but ultimately would lead to us taking that recommendation with the contract to our Board of School Commissioners in February or March before that next school year.
And last question, Ron, can you talk about the cycle in which we get updates on the partnership? I think in the past we've done it annually. Is that the plan to be sure that it is working and that as a board we're satisfied with progress?
Yeah, so to address the updates, I think we at a minimum like to bring folks and at least once annually in the past that has shifted back and forth to try to find the sweet spot. In addition to that, as you all are aware, a couple of months ago, we released the first performance report that really dug into the performance of each of these schools at a standardized level, because oftentimes the data you all receive during those updates is formative and more leading indicators of performance. We want to make sure that on the standardized metrics that the state has established, the schools are also demonstrating signs of progress. So yes, both an annual update as well as Matchbook will now be included. Their performance, along with performance benchmarks that we establish, will be included in that performance report, and you'll have that transparency.
Good luck to you. I'm anxious to hear all the great news, as with other IPS partnerships that we've been involved with. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I didn't introduce, so if I could just real quick give folks a chance to introduce themselves, even after you heard from them. Sandra, you want to come up, and then Jamie, you can tell them what you do. Sure.
I'm Saj and George. I'm the founder and CEO of Matchbook Learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my name's Jamie Vandewally. I'm the portfolio officer for Indianapolis Public Schools.
Thank you.
Dr. Amy Swan, I already said hi.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. So is there any other questions by board members? I have a motion. I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Wicker,
Yes.
Dr. Yeager.
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron. Good luck. Up next, we have discussion reports, CSUSA transition updates. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Charlie Schlegel. I'm the school transition liaison for the state board. I was here several months ago to introduce myself. My colleague Joe Mount and I organize community meetings and a task force to develop recommendations to the state board as to next steps for Emma Donnan, T.C. Howe, and Emmerich Manual High Schools as they exit turnaround status. As you all know, the contract by which CSUSA serves as the special management team exits or expires in June of 2020. So our intention is to have our task force present to you recommendations next month as to the next steps for these schools. One of my important goals today is to hear your questions so that I can return to the task force and share those questions with the task force as we prepare our recommendations. Real quick before we get to those questions, I want to tell or share with you a quick timeline as to how we got here.
Absolutely.
2014 Public Impact made a presentation to the state board based upon what they had seen over the first 2-3 years of each of the turnaround academies run by a special management team. One of the important findings of their work is the importance of community input into this process. So on our slide there, you can see examples of work that we've done to bring community members, stakeholders together and to discuss the best options available to the state board and identify what they believe is the best option and explain why. If you can advance to the next slide, you can see kind of an example of the broad array of people. Oh, that's how you do it. A broad array of the stakeholders who've been a part of this. So as we've done this, we've also met with the task force to share the input. Each of our task force members have been a part of our community meetings. We have 2 more remaining, one this evening and another on Tuesday. And we've brought their findings out of these community meetings. We've also generated a number of questions that we've in turn presented, gotten answers to, and presented via various social media tools. 3 important principles we've consistently followed. One is to be comprehensive, is to look at all aspects of each of the options. As you all know, there's 3 core options available to the state board. We've researched each of these and then brought that back to the task force. We've also encouraged questions from every possible source, and then we've chased down answers to those. We've been, another principle that we've consistently followed is transparency. It's been very important to us. Everything we do is available to all to see. The answers we gather, the data we review, the minutes of our task force meetings. My colleague Joe Mount has really used social media well to consistently make all of these resources available to folks. And the third principle is one of balance. There's various interests at play here, and so we want to make sure in every one of our meetings that we have a variety of representatives. An example of that is last Wednesday, one of the coldest days in 30 years, several of us gathered with some alumni from Manual High School, and we made sure that we had both a representative of CSUSA there and a representative of IPS. We want to stay nonpartisan throughout this process. On the memo that we provided for you as part of your packet, you'll also find we have a number of findings. One is, Donnan is different. You all know that in 2015, IPS and CSUSA signed an innovation agreement by which they started Donnan Elementary. If that agreement is renewed, and IPS and CSUSA are currently discussing that, then that school will become a K-8, at which point the IPS and CSUSA are likely to come together to decide what's the best option by which to do that. Other innovations like Matchbook Learning, which just presented, these schools have charters, and they operate through an innovation agreement. Whether that's the best option for CSUSA or for Emma Donnan is going to be discussed and really figured out through that partnership between IPS and CSUSA. A second important finding is IPS's commitment to its plan that it published in September 2017, which said that if Manual and Howe are returned to them, they would not operate them as high schools. They've stayed committed to that plan, and so that has informed that option as we bring that information to community meetings. The third is that probably the area where we spent the greatest amount of time is chartering. And CSUSA has expressed an interest in pursuing charters for these schools. And if they do, then we've identified 3 key takeaways for the state board to simply be aware of. One is they need to team up with an organizer, and the organizer is actually the entity that holds that charter. A third is through the chartering process, a lot of the questions that we've gotten from community members is questions about the financial sustainability of the schools. One can understand that given that IPS's decision recently to close several schools. The chartering process requires that CSUSA or its organizer demonstrate the financial sustainability of these operations. Per state law, if the schools do receive a charter, then as it stands right now, the IPS will lease or sell each of these facilities to the organizer in order to operate these schools. That's the central findings. I'd love to hear your question.
Yeah, quick question. Was any bill filed this session to clean up this process at all as it relates to the chartering?
Yes, there was.
Ron, who do you want to answer that?
I think, not to put either of us on the spot, I think Alicia is the most appropriate person to answer that question.
Yeah, hi. So 1641 was filed this session. It's specifically around charter schools. It has several provisions in it that would address a couple of aspects around charters. I can send you a more detailed summary.
Well, Alicia, I'm specifically referring to the exit from a TSO situation,
So
whereby they don't have to start from scratch.
It does not address that.
So they would have to go through the typical chartering process like a new school.
Where the bill is right now, yes.
Yeah, see, that needs to be addressed.
But it's yet to be voted on or amended in committee.
Have we
so
given
we're-
any guidance or advice around that? I've been talking about that for about 2 years now, that we need to ask them to fix that.
We have not, but that's something we could look into. Yep.
And if I could, one thing that's come out of this process, I think, is there are a lot of questions that answers require particular expertise. I think Dr. Schlegel mentioned the financial sustainability. To be fully candid, a charter school authorizer is the entity in the state of Indiana that is equipped with the capacity and expertise to do those types of evaluations. The community has bubbled those up, and we have no reason to believe that there will be issues with that moving forward. I want to make sure that's clear, but I do think a full and thorough authorizing process, maybe truncated a little bit, but we rely heavily on their capacity to do those types of evaluations. Again, we don't expect any issues with those evaluations.
But Ron, wouldn't you say this is a unique process as it relates to Charter School USA in Addison, where they've been operating under, our jurisdiction for over 5 years now? I mean, to have to go and start from scratch as if this is a new entity just coming in, it's not the same.
What I'm hearing from you, and I think what we can commit to is, yes, I agree, and most charter school authorizers have a renewal process, which is unique and distinct from their new applicant process. And I think as we move forward in this, what I'm hearing from you is we need to engage some authorizers to see if they would be willing to process the application through their renewal process, even though they formally haven't had a charter. You're right. The fact set is that they have been operating for the last 7 years as a school in the state of Indiana. They have a track record.
Well, I'm not sure the statute would currently permit them to charter School USA through a renewal process.
We'll check into it.
Any other questions, board members? Dr. Freitas?
I've had the opportunity to work with Charlie as a member of the task force. I'm your representative. And first I want to commend Charlie on doing an unbelievable, remarkable job in organizing communication and bringing together the community. I'm amazed at the public hearings where 200, 300, 400 people show up to give us input. And that's just unheard of. And so I don't know if it's Joe Mount's social media. If it is, we need to hire him as a political consultant, maybe. But I think it's through Charlie doing a great job. And I say that, number one, just to commend Charlie, but commend the task force, commend the community coming together. In those meetings, the community is really excited about the future of these schools and care deeply about these schools. And so I'm excited to have Charlie come back next month to share the recommendations of the committee. And I want you to know up front that they are going to be well-researched, community-supported recommendations. And so, Charlie, thanks for your work. Please share my condolences to our fellow team members on the committee.
Well, I will say that we had a meeting last Tuesday, and our turnout was 10 times more than the temperature outside. So
there were 8 people.
Yeah.
Any other questions by board members? Seeing none? Thank you very much. Moving on to assessment.
Well, Dr. Flores is coming up last week, 2 weeks ago with the weather. We had the opportunity to do the stress test.
Yes.
Although not officially called the stress test.
That was way too exciting.
Let's face the reality. Everybody across the state calls it the stress test. And ours went well. I haven't heard any complaints or any negative feedback. I know a lot of schools, because of weather, had to do it on the follow-up date.
Yep.
But again, heard positive things. And so that was a good thing, especially knowing we're going into a new vendor and people were nervous and apprehensive. And so I appreciate that it went smoothly. So thank you to everybody on your end for helping make that a great process.
Thank you for that. I was going to provide a brief update on that in my slides, so.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I can go straight there though, since we're on that topic. So we do have the statewide readiness test that we provide annually, also known as the stress test. And so we've been working through that process most recently. The weather was a challenge for us. We typically allow local corporations to determine when they want to participate in that, and given the weather, obviously we had to use that backup date this year. We also have several corporations that have not been able to complete it, and we've been working with them individually on the opportunity to do that. It really is designed both for them to test their local infrastructure and try to determine any points of weakness or challenge, in addition to trying to collect some data that we can utilize from our office to make sure that capacity is understood, and if there's challenges with any of that, that we have a little bit of time to get in front of that. So just a few highlights I wanted to share with you. From those data reports, we did have the maximum concurrency occur on January 23rd, which was the first date, and that was at about 56,000 at that single point in time. Another point I wanted to note for all of you as well is we have about 1.8 million that's anticipated overall in terms of concurrency. So we were just at about 3% of that in terms of the statewide readiness trial. The other thing I wanted to note is in terms of AIR system, our window overlays independently from a lot of other states that are participating in assessments this spring. So we do not anticipate right now any challenges with our windows as they're scheduled. In terms of the help desk, they were available to address any concerns. Overall, we had about 200 calls that came in over the course of those 2 days. And right now we only have 4 cases that are unresolved, and those are just because we haven't been able to circle back with the person that originated that request. But it's not that there's a lingering issue that we haven't been able to resolve. Any questions on that quick recap? Okay. In terms of upcoming windows, we are really crossing the threshold into spring testing very soon. So with Monday, February 11th, we are going to be initiating our iLearn biology window, which is the one that's designed for students that are completing it either at the end of first semester or second trimester. So it will be a bigger window than we had in December. And then the iStep, ECA, and grade 10 retests, that will initiate on Monday as well. And then closely behind that, we will have our first time administration part 1 opening at the end of February. And then the last update I wanted to provide is we actually are kicking off our first standard setting for iLearn in February as well. We're actually doing this for the U.S. government assessment, which is an optional ECA that's being provided for the first time this year. Because schools have the opportunity to use this ECA potentially as part of students' course grade, we are doing this standard setting in advance. So we'll be bringing more information to you once that standard setting takes place. But essentially, they're going to be setting one cut to differentiate students that are either at proficiency or below. So with the other iLearn assessments, we have those 4 different levels. Since this is a much different assessment and an optional assessment, we're just setting that one cut to differentiate essentially from passing or not passing.
What's unique about this assessment?
What's unique about it? It's unique in that it doesn't have accountability associated with it, and also it specifically was designed to serve as an end-of-course assessment. So the way that it was built in terms of the blueprint was also very different. It's a longer assessment based on what the educators wanted to have prioritized in terms of that really serving as an end-of-course assessment. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, graduation pathways.
Good morning, board. I am Andy Mellon, and I am the new Chief Innovation Officer for the Department of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to be in this position, and I really appreciate Dr. McCormick in her confidence in giving me this opportunity to serve.
Welcome, Dr. Mellon.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Appreciate it. This is my first official presentation to you as a board, and I really want to recognize Ben Carter, who's here in the room today, for all the great work he's done related to graduation pathways. Of course, you have a document that's been provided in advance electronically, but there are just a few things that maybe I could highlight for you. First of all, there has been the development of a middle school resource for the state. It's been developed and sent to the field, so we appreciate that. There's also been the Innovation WebEx series has begun. There's already been one WebEx, and that featured reaching potential through manufacturing. It was a program out of Augusta, Georgia, where students could earn and learn at a local manufacturing company and earn college credit and certifications. The next WebEx will highlight the Pathways in Technology Early College High School, or P-TECH model. We've received over 375 questions concerning the implementation of pathways, none of them policy related, mainly implementation based questions. In 51 of those were not included in the policy guidance document. They're included in the link in your packet, so you have those. In terms of professional development, we've conducted over 32 in-person training sessions and have conducted webinars that are posted on the DOE's website. In terms of best practices, they're posted on the Graduation Pathways webpage. We've also added a best practice folder that allows schools to dive deeper into specific areas of need. Ben and I just spoke this morning. This is day 3 for me in my role. And Ben just got in from Denver, Colorado at 1:30 in the morning. So give him a lot of credit. But we spoke today about, these resources that have been provided to schools. How can we better make sure that the people in the field, the districts, are fully taking advantage of the resources? Because in my review of them as a former superintendent, I think they're very helpful. And we just need to make sure that people are fully aware of them and can utilize them. And then lastly, in relationship to compliance, information is reported to you through monthly memos, and we've also shared early adopter data, and that was shared at the last meeting in January.
Absolutely.
That is the report. Do you have any questions?
Questions of our members? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. And
Thank
welcome.
you, sir.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Up next, we have social emotional behavioral health plans, social emotional learning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Glad to be here this morning and provide you an update on the social emotional behavioral wellness work that the department is doing. The rollout of all the materials, resources, competencies have been released throughout the month of January. The last release did happen on February 1st. So the website is live and all the resources are on there. On February 14th, we'll have an internal brown bag description, explanation to all the internal DOE staff about how to use those resources. So when folks reach out to us, we're able to respond to their requests and our staff will be familiar. Then on February 19th, there will be a WebEx, which anybody can join and see how to use the resources, the research behind it, etc. So if you want to join that, read Dr. McCormick's weekly message on Friday and you'll have the WebEx information. On the 27th and 28th of February, we are co-sponsoring the Whole Child Summit, and we have 450 people registered and a waiting list of 100. Originally, the limit on that group was 400. We extended it to 450 and continued to have more and more folks wanting to come. So I think we're looking at a 2.0 Whole Child Summit in our future.
What was the date on that one? I'm sorry.
February 27th and 28th. The happiness course, which comes from the Science of Wellbeing out of Yale, we piloted with 32 educators in the state of Indiana over the past few weeks, had a very successful pilot with that, so we'll be rolling that out in May and offering it to all educators in Indiana that want to have the opportunity to take that Science of Wellbeing course, with the vision of looking at that being something that could be done with students as well, as we all look to have self-care and be better with our own social emotional wellness. Then our MTSS framework, that website is live, and we will be piloting starting in May with 5 districts, which is 10 schools that'll be piloting that framework, and we will start our MTSS regional roadshow this summer, and those dates will be released in May. So that's the work coming out of the Social Emotional Behavioral Wellness office at this time. Do you have questions?
I wish you could find some work.
I know.
You sound very busy.
I know.
Robin and
we
her
work
team
hard.
honestly have been amazing. We hear all the time from the field on just how helpful you have been.
Thank you.
The materials and resources. Christy Berger's been a big part of that, but your team has been just wonderful. I know Ken Folks is playing into that as well. So well done. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
work you're doing for the state. It's just quality.
Attitude reflects leadership, so thank you.
Thank you.
I do have to say that I am as excited about this work coming out as I am anything we've ever done. So kudos
Fantastic.
and keep up the great work. It's
Thank
very,
you.
very, very important. Any other questions, Marianne?
Not sure it's working.
Oh,
I was just going to echo, thank you so much for making those comments. Obviously, having more participants than there are spaces really speaks to the need for this type of work in the state of Indiana. And I know the work that Robin and the DOE have done to put these materials together are needed and appreciated by the field. Thank you.
thank you, Tony.
I also like to thank Dr. McCormick and Robin and the department for putting the plan together in such a timely fashion. And I'd also like to point out that that now shifts the ball to the court of State Board of Education to make sure that we now come up with the rulemakings necessary to implement this plan. As we all know, we're sort of catching up on this one. So I want to make sure we have a timeline and we keep the ball moving now that the department has passed the baton to the State Board. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.
At least another 2 hours. What am I going to do?